And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick taking you through to that closing bell with a global simulcast. We're joined now by Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms, television, radio. Our partnership with YouTube, a broader market. Carol Massar, at least with the S&P 500, set to log its first record high since June 2nd. But we're keeping an eye on earnings from AMD and from SpaceX.
Yep, those are the two big ones. SpaceX right now still up about 9.6% ahead of that earnings release, or quarterly update, if you will. It's definitely a risk-on trade, but there's a lot at stake. Investors want some specifics when it comes to SpaceX's business. We'll see whether or not we get them, and we'll see what kind of mood Elon is in, as Max Chafkin reminded us. Sometimes it's upbeat, sometimes it's not.
SpaceX not the only company reporting after the bell, but it's certainly, I think, fair to say the most highly anticipated one. We'll hear from AMD, we'll hear from Paramount Skydance. Booking Holdings will give us some sort of potential view on how travel has been and how we expect travel will play out for the remainder of the year. And Viasat, interestingly enough, a competitor to SpaceX's Starlink business, is reporting too.
Yeah, I do want to point out, though, I was taking a look at the implied market moves and all the companies that are reporting earnings. AMD, an implied move of about 8%. Which is high. SpaceX right now, implied market move after the bell, or tomorrow in the cast session, 15% here. And of course, we talk about a company that's not only going to be driven, a stock that's going to be driven by the earnings, but the idea that with about 640 million shares now available for trading, keep in mind, in 2 days, you're going to add as many as 911 million more shares to that, and that seems to be where some of the concern. Short interest now, well over 200 million shares. Record high for the Dow Jones Industrial Average here on this Tuesday afternoon, up more than 900 points at 1.7%. A record high for the S&P 500, up 1.8%. The NASDAQ Composite up about 2.6%. The NASDAQ 100 up 3.3%. And the Russell 2000, Carol Massar, closing out the day 1.9%.
All right, as we wait for SpaceX, booking is out, and let's get to the outlook. The company says it sees third quarter revenue at constant FX up 5% to 7%. Third quarter gross bookings up 4% to 6%. And now we have Paramount out as well. Yeah,
Paramount Skydance now out with their earnings as well. For the most recent quarter, the company did say that year-over-year revenue did rise about 16% to $6.91 billion. That looks like a beat. It looks like on the bottom line also a beat as well. Here's your forecast for the full year. The company says expect total revenue of $30 billion. It says expect EBITDA of $3.8 billion, which actually looks a little bit light. And for the current quarter, the company says revenue 6.95 to 7.15 billion. That's the range on Paramount Skydance.
Looking at some highlights here in the investor letter, the company said that second quarter was the best quarter for retention in Paramount Plus's history. It was powered by Dutton Ranch, UFC, and of course the FIFA World Cup non-exclusively across 6 countries in Latin America. They gained about 2 million new Paramount Plus subscribers in the quarter, now 81.6 million worldwide. The company too says it's raising its full year 2026 outlook, as you mentioned, to 3.8 to 3.9 billion in adjusted EBITDA.
All right, guys, Amgen, let's go to that. Second quarter adjusted EPS, $6.29 a share. That is a beat. $5.62 is what the street was expecting. Let's go to the outlook. Amgen seeing fiscal year revenue of $38.2 billion to $39.4 billion. That is above its earlier estimate of $37.1 to $38.5, and sees fiscal year adjusted EPS of $22.30 to $23.50 a share, and that is too above its estimates. And you're seeing shares of Amgen, which are already up about 19% year to date now, with a gain of about 1.5%. SpaceX, that first number coming, the second quarter revenue, $7.8 billion, and Romaine, that is above the estimate of $6.81 billion.
Absolutely. Here, we're going to wait for some of these other numbers to trickle out. This is going to be a complicated report. Remember, we're basically talking about 3 primary businesses. There's space business, which is effectively the launch, the connectivity business, which of course is Starlink, and the AI business. And a lot of people not only want to see what it did on the quarter, but more importantly here, what type of long-term forecast the company will give with regards to that. Also, Tim, obviously the idea of where we might go with regards to a more of a mashup. A lot of speculation about what could happen with Tesla, whether that gets absorbed into SpaceX, and the idea here as to what sort of deals and partnerships SpaceX can actually announce to to keep investors placated in the short term. We got a little taste of that just a few moments ago, Tim, when they announced that they are partnering with NVIDIA to use NVIDIA's Rubin chips here on these orbital data centers that it's trying to build out.
Yeah, that's the Starmind AI-1 satellite compute payload. The company partnering with NVIDIA to design the satellite compute payload. I want to remind people, too, that connectivity business is the vast majority of its main business in terms of revenue. In 2025 for the year, 61% of the business was connectivity. That includes the enterprise and consumer versions of Starlink. Space accounts for about 22% of the business, and AI, as of 2025, was about 17% of the company's revenue.
Another headline coming, SpaceX second quarter AI segment operating loss of $1.26 billion versus an estimate that the street was looking for a higher number, $2.39 billion. Right now we're seeing SpaceX shares, which rallied big time today, just up about 0.8%, Romaine.
Yeah, absolutely. And these numbers continue to trickle out here. The company says that EBITDA in the most recent quarter, $3.5 billion. That's well above what the street was looking for $2 billion. Again, that's for the company as a whole. It also says that it reached 12 million Starlink subscribers at the end of the second quarter. And here's your CapEx number, which, of course, a lot of people are paying attention to, $18.37 billion, basically $18 billion in CapEx. Now, that's backwards looking. That is for the second quarter. It'll be interesting to see what the next couple of quarters look like here. The company did say that it did end the second quarter with $100 billion in cash and cash equivalents.
Yeah, the estimate was actually for higher than that. The estimate was for $18.6 billion. Some other numbers to highlight here. SpaceX reached 12 million Starlink subscribers at the end of the second quarter. As you mentioned, the AI segment operating loss, $1.26 billion. The estimate was for a loss of $2.39 billion. Shares bouncing around in the after hours. Now just down about 1.3%, but shares surged in today's trading session, still off quite a bit from that high earlier this year. The estimate for second quarter Starlink subscribers was 12.19, so that was within expectations. The company also expecting that Cursor deal to close this quarter, that is the third quarter of the year. Once again, these headlines are continuing to trickle out. SpaceX shares down just by about 2.6% right now.
Our team putting its first story out on the Bloomberg. SpaceX's revenue exceeded Wall Street's expectations in the company's first quarterly financial report following its blockbuster IPO back in June. The satellite, space, and AI conglomerate reported revenue of $7.8 billion, greater than the $6.81 billion that analysts polled by Bloomberg expected on average, unveiled an operating loss of $1.26 billion from its AI business, better than the consensus expectation for a loss of $2.39 billion. But we should point out it was the largest IPO. We've seen quite a roller coaster after a couple of days initially out of the gate when it IPO'd of moving higher. We've seen the stock pull back, and short interest has been very high. And that is something to keep in mind as this company goes through the release and the analyst call to see what kind of short covering if the news is really upbeat.
Well, that's what I'm curious about, too, is how much of the share price reaction today is even going to be actually tied to the earnings themselves. I think it's over 200 million shares were shorted just coming into today. My guess is that number went higher as we got closer to this earnings report. You have 600 plus million shares now out there floating around, and you have a lockup expiry in 2 days that's going to potentially add 911 million more shares. Not to mention, you get almost double that when you get towards the end of the year. So that's going to potentially put some downward pressure on this stock. But of course, a lot will depend on the conference call, which kicks off in about 30 minutes time. And we're going to hear from Elon Musk, and he's going to have to say, look, I got a plan. Either you believe me or you don't.
That's the Elon premium that Max Chafkin was writing about for the Business Week Daily newsletter earlier today. I also want to point out that we're seeing a relatively muted reaction as of now just to these numbers. Like you said, Romaine, a lot of it will likely come on the call. And going into, as of this morning, the options market was pricing a move of upwards of 14% to the upside or the downside. Getting a little more information from the company about the most recent quarter, government contracts, interestingly enough, $6 billion in multi-year U.S. government contracts. That's for Starshield, our own Dana Hull reporting. SpaceX shares up right now by about 1%.
And let's not forget Lauren Grush, who wrote a preview and covers this company and the space industry, said, what's really important is getting also updates on Starship specifically. Are there any technical setbacks? Because this is certainly key in terms of getting satellites out into the suborbital, or they've only been suborbital, but getting them further out. And that's part of the idea of getting either data centers in space, but this is so important, certainly, to the company's story going forward. All right, right now, folks, shares of SpaceX just up about 1% in the aftermarket.